Welcome to First Take. Kerry champion Skip Bayless in house. Stephen A. Smith will join us just in a few moments from New York City.
Now I'm hearing that he's having a problem with his lights.
Because he wants to make sure they're perfect.
So as usual, he's in the dark.
Okay, as usual.
We know he's always in the dark on the show.
He
will be right here.
He'll be here in just a few moments. He wants to make sure he looks his best for you all at home. In the meantime, we have someone just as fabulous joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Way more fabulous. NFL analyst Mark Brunell. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
To start the big show. You're starting the big show. Let's talk about what we have coming up on the show today. J.J. Watt, I think he has a few extra dollars. He is now the highest paid NFL player, defensive player. 50, how many guaranteed dollars? Some 50 odd million?
50-something million. He'll be okay.
I think he has a future.
Yeah,
no?
I think he'll be all right.
Plus, Derek Carr gets the start over Matt Schaub. We'll talk about that. You know about that quarterback.
Yes.
How would you feel?
I like it.
All right.
I like it.
But first, our ESPN Power Panel has made year-end predictions. Again, these are analysts, writers, experts, and their consensus picks on division winners, Super Bowl champions, and individual awards. One of the picks here is Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is considered the Super Bowl MVP for this season. So you may remember he won the MVP in 2010 and obviously the Super Bowl in 2011. But let me ask you this. Let me reverse that. Super Bowl in 2010, MVP in 2011. Skip Bayless, do you agree he will win this season with MVP?
I absolutely do not. And I know now why Stephen A. Smith opted not to be in this segment on this show, because he knew he had no chance of beating me on this question. So, Mark, now you're going to have to play Stephen A.
Okay.
Although you certainly don't have to share his opinion on this topic. But there have been two consensus picks. We're about to talk about the next one next. But the two expert consensus picks that are mind-blowing to me are that Denver will win this year's Super Bowl and that Aaron Rodgers and not Peyton Manning will win this year's MVP. I do not see it. I see Peyton Manning running away once again with this year's MVP. I do not see Denver getting back to and winning this year's Super Bowl. But back to Peyton. So coming off a season in which, as we all know, he set single-season records for passing touchdowns and yards passing, and his offense set all-time NFL single-season records for most points scored, most touchdowns scored, most first downs. Coming off that season, and now coming off a preseason in which I thought Peyton Manning looked like he was not even in midseason form. He looked like he was in playoff form to me. So coming off all that, I cannot fathom how he won't have another great season, even at age 38. And as you well know, that's a pretty advanced age for quarterbacks. But he looks healthy. He looks, as we saw when he ran all the way to the end zone to get in Swearinger's face.
To tell him something?
He looks extremely motivated to get back to the Super Bowl. And so I'm thinking along that trail, he's easily going to win his second straight MVP that, to me, should be his third straight MVP. I thought he should have won 2 years ago over Adrian Peterson. But that being said, he gets Ryan Clady back, who's his blindside protector, who's one of the best in the business. His line will be, if not the best, it's certainly the most experienced. He's the best at getting rid of the football, I think, that I've ever seen. So that's not going to be an issue. And then on Aaron Rodgers' side, not that he won't be very good to great on some Sundays, but to me, the Packers seem to be more prone this year to run the football. They've got Eddie Lacy. They got James Starks. They got Dwyane Harris. They have a complement of backs that will complement Aaron Rodgers' play to the point that I think they'll be a very balanced football team, if not err on the side of running the football more than they have in the past. All of that adds up to Peyton Manning should be the prohibitive favorite to win MVP, yet all of our expert picks, how many are there? There were 80 who participated in this for the ESPN poll.
Yep.
A consensus went with Aaron Rodgers, just as a consensus went with Denver to win the Super Bowl.
Everyone's
sorry, I'm lost on both. Fire away.
Well, Skip, I'm going to agree with you, regardless of the experts and the consensus. It's not a consensus because I believe Peyton Manning will have just as good a year as he had last year, and maybe even better. What was it, 55 touchdown passes? And this is why. Ryan Clady's back, of course. Peyton Manning looks to be in playoff form. But the addition of Emmanuel Sanders,
pretty big,
who replaces Eric Decker, I think that's a huge improvement Eric Decker, not the most physical receiver. Obviously had big production, but you bring in a young guy who can take the top off a defense, unlike Eric Decker could. A guy that's quick, dynamic, you get the ball in his hands, and he can do something with it. I believe the skill positions for the Denver Broncos are better this year than they were a year ago. That's why I think Peyton Manning will win another MVP.
Okay, so where does that leave us with Wes Welker? Because, again, he practiced yesterday. He's had 3 concussions in a fairly short time span now. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure he can last. Let's just do the hypothetical. What if he doesn't last? Let's be objective about this. So how much would that hurt Peyton if within 2 or 3 games he loses Wes Welker for the rest of the year?
Yeah, that would be very difficult. I mean, he's the go-to guy for Peyton Manning. In a short amount of time, they have obviously developed a rapport. Losing him would be difficult. But at the same time, you know, I see Emmanuel Sanders as a guy that can develop into that role. Listen, if there's a guy that can make a young receiver or get that offense going without excuse me.
Which way are we going?
Emmanuel Sanders without
Wes Welker. If Wes Welker gets beat up, listen, Peyton Manning can do more with less. He's a guy that could take a young guy, even if Wes Welker's not there. Listen, it's Peyton Manning we're talking about. I mean, he has the ability, regardless of the guys that are around him, to make them great. He did that with Decker. He will make that with Emmanuel Sanders. It would hurt them if Welker wasn't in there, but they're going to be just fine. I still, even if Welker only lasts 2 or 3 weeks, I still believe he's going to win the MVP.
Wow. Okay, so if you gentlemen are incorrect, and Rodgers does win the MVP, he would be the 9th player in NFL history to win 2. Good for him. Let's move on. We were talking about this a minute ago. We're staying with this ESPN Power poll and panel and what people are saying. Well, the Football Outsiders and Numberfire both believe that the Denver Broncos will win the Super Bowl, about 17%. They were prohibitive favorites, as Skip Bayless would like to say. Well, our power panel agrees as well. They also think the Denver Broncos will win the Super Bowl. So who wants to take this, Skip?
I'm going to take it.
Yeah, because you seem to believe they will not. I'm not for sure. So who do you think will win the Super Bowl? Do you agree with them?
I am again dumbfounded by routinely consensus picks, even in the Numbers Fire. We saw the
Numberfire,
right, and there was another one last week.
Football Outsiders,
as they ran their sequences of Super Bowls, and it looked like to them that Denver would have the best shot, and I don't get it. Let's start with the stat. And again, I'm not big on historical stats, but this one leaps out at me. This one I'm going to take to my bank. And that is, it has been 40 years, 40 years, since a team lost the Super Bowl and bounced back and won the next year's Super Bowl. You have to go back to, you're probably old enough to remember, the Miami Dolphins lost to my Dallas Cowboys in 1971 and bounced back in 72 to beat the Redskins. That's the last time it's happened. And in the NBA, we've got the San Antonio Spurs who just did it. So, but those are the Spurs, and that's a very special organization, as we all know. So let's keep them over here.
Yes, they're very wonderful.
So now I look at, why would you pick Denver over the Seattle Seahawks, who look like they should be prohibitively favored, to my eye, off the preseason? Because, again, you could argue that they lost Chris Clemens and Red Bryant on defensive ends, so maybe they lost a little bit of leadership and pass rush there. But to me, the defense will just slowly, just by experience, get a little better, even if the productivity might not be quite where it was last year. The offense looks better than ever to me. So Russell Wilson played at a Peyton Manning level during the preseason. I know it's just the preseason. He was special in this preseason, and it looks like with Percy Harvin, if he can stay healthy, their offense will dramatically improve over last year when they just sort of game managed and tried to score enough to give their defense a chance to win the game. Okay, so now I look at Denver. Are you banking on their defense? Because they lost a lot of valuable cogs. DRC, Wesley Woodyard, Sean Phillips, Robert Ayers, Mike Adams, Paris Lennon. These are all quality football players on a defense that wasn't great last year. But now you say you've dramatically upgraded with, I'm going to give you T.J. Ward in the back end.
Yes.
I give you that. He's a big-time football player. But then, as you well know, I'm not a big DeMarcus Ware fan because from my Dallas Cowboys over the last 4 years, he just didn't make any plays. I love him as a guy. We've had him on the show. He's a great guy. But really, he's going to change life for the Denver defense. I don't see it.
Right.
Aqib Talib, another guy I tried to bank on last year with New England, he's never seemingly there when you really need him. So will he be there for Denver when they really need him? Will he upgrade their defense into elite status? I'm sorry, I don't see it. So then, is it just schedule that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Is it just because Denver plays a cakewalk schedule? I don't see cakewalk. I'm sorry. They have to go to Seattle. They have to go again to New England. They have to go to Cincinnati. We know they have to go to San Diego and to Kansas City. And San Diego gave them all they wanted 3 times last year, beat them at Denver late in the year in Week 15, and the other 2 games were within a touchdown, the game in the playoffs and the one at San Diego. So I'm thinking they're going to have a pretty hard time with the Chargers this year. They have San Francisco and Arizona at home. I don't think they're cakewalk games. So now I'm thinking, really, can Denver repeat that 13-3 that we've seen the last 2 years? I'm not so sure about that. Could I see more like 5 losses this year? I could see 5 losses. Will that vault you into home field advantage throughout the playoffs? I'm not so sure about that. So where are we? What case are we making that Denver is going to beat a 40-year stat here? More than 40 years since somebody bounced back and won the Super Bowl. I don't see it.
Yeah, Skip, I don't see it either. I mean, let's just say they do go 13-3, they get home field advantage. Let's say they get into the Super Bowl. Who are they going to face? Green Bay, San Francisco, or Seattle? And what is the trait of that defense? They are physical. They will out-hit you. They will hit you in the mouth. And as you said, with the defense where they're at personnel-wise, I don't think they can do it. They didn't do it last year. I mean, you could argue that Denver is a finesse offense. For them to be able to match physicality with physicality against one of those NFC teams, there's no way.
Okay.
And a perfect indication was last year's Super Bowl. Unless they make a huge improvement personnel-wise, bringing in guys that are physical, durable, that will hit you much like the Seattle Seahawks do, I don't see them winning. Could they get in it on their offense alone? Yes. But you win championships with defense, and they are not a better defense this season.
They're not a better defense.
No.
And what do you see so far from Seattle?
The same. Skip.
More of the same.
They haven't missed a beat.
They should be the favorites.
They lost, Clemens and Chris Clemens and of course Red Bryant.
Right.
But the Seattle Seahawks look tough, and they've got a pretty good quarterback that's playing good football, even if it's just preseason.
And Mark Brunell knows a thing about quarterbacks, do you not?
A little bit.
Okay. J.J. Watt agreed to a 6-year, $100 million deal with the Texans. 51.8 of that is guaranteed. That's the most guaranteed money for any defensive player currently under contract. Next in line is Patrick Peterson. Watt was supposed to make a little under $2 million this season, which means before this new deal, 245 defensive players were going to make more money than him. So by the metrics, we're talking about disrupted dropbacks. J.J. Watt has been the most impactful player, defensive player in the NFL since his rookie season. So we asked the question, is he the most valuable defensive player in the league? So says the contract, one Mark. So can you tell me, sir, is he?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at J.J. Watt, you look at his production. 2012, 20.5 sacks. Last year, 10.5 sacks. Numbers were down a little bit, but he was double-teamed all the time. You look at his durability. He's been on the field.
Yeah.
You look at his work ethic. I don't know if there's a work ethic in the NFL like J.J. Watt's. Incredible. I mean, he is a once-in-a-generation defensive lineman. And 25 years old. The best thing I like about J.J. Watt is the person. You hear all the right things. I read this quote a couple days ago, and I want to read it to you because it just jumped out at me. They're talking about, J.J. Watt, what about a holdout? Would you ever consider it? This is what he said. I wouldn't want to hold out because that would cause me to miss time with my teammates, and right now, I want to practice. You don't hear that. I want to be out here with these young guys. I want to teach them the things I know. I want to better myself. I want to be a Houston Texan. I want to play football. I want to be the best I can because I can't do that by sitting on the couch. Skip, that just jumped out at me. I mean, you're looking at a player, the person, a guy that's only 25 years old that has his best football, I believe, ahead of him. I mean, when you think of the Houston Texans, there's not a running back or a quarterback that comes to your mind right away. It's J.J. Watt. And for that reason, well-deserved contract. He's earned this contract, and I believe his best football is ahead of him.
I can't disagree with a single point you made, and he is worth every penny they just paid him. But our question was, is he the most valuable on the football field? Again, would I have locked him up for that? Yes, I would have. But can I make the case that he scares defensive coordinators more than a few other guys? Now, here's my issue, and you're going to be able to respect this because you're a little older, so you know what I'm talking about. Some of our young people who watch this show have no idea what I'm talking about. But there was this guy named Lawrence Taylor once upon a time.
Yeah.
He dominated football games the way no defensive player I ever watched dominated, unless you want to talk about Deron as a cornerback, because he would just take half the field away. But it wasn't readily apparent to the naked eye the way Lawrence Taylor wreaked havoc play after play, mostly as a stand-up pass rusher, and you just couldn't block the guy. He would disrupt, he would discombobulate, he would destroy you psychologically. And I don't see one of those guys playing right now of that caliber. Then we had Reggie White in the interior as a pretty much of an unblockable force who could move around, play end or tackle. We had the various Mean Joe Greens, and then at linebacker Dick Butkus, Jack Lambert, obviously Ray Lewis is just retired a year ago. And then we had a Bruce Smith. And quick story, as I was covering the Dallas Cowboys in their breakthrough Super Bowl in the 90s when they beat Buffalo in a rout, the night before I saw North Turner and sat down, actually had dinner with him the night before that Super Bowl, and he was the coordinator for that young Cowboy team. And he said, look, we will have 2 people on Bruce Smith every play tomorrow. And if we can't block him, we will lose this game, because they were afraid they couldn't block Bruce Smith. Well, is there anybody playing right now like Bruce Smith? And by the way, they were able to contain Bruce Smith, and it was a complete wipeout because the rest of the defense wasn't very good. Well, now I'm back to J.J. Watt. His team went 2-14 last year. How do you reconcile 2-14 with most valuable defensive player? Because I'm too old school where I want to see that guy take over games and actually like tilt the playing field in favor of the Houston Texans, and I don't see that enough. I get what you're saying. All those things are exactly right, except is he a Lawrence Taylor type? I think you'd have to say no, right?
Well, I would say he's a Lawrence Taylor type on a bad football team.
Okay.
You know, and their issues last year were their quarterback. You know, they were their quarterback. But I do know this, as a quarterback, if I'm going into a game and J.J. Watt's there, I have one concern. Who's going to take care of him? I know he's a defensive lineman, but still, J.J. Watt has the ability to wreck a game. He only got 10.5 sacks last year, and the reason is because offenses went in with a game plan. Hey, we're going to put 2 guys on him. 2 guys on him. The year before, 20.5 sacks. You know, he was still a secret. You know, he was still, young player. But listen, if they can get that offense going, he becomes that guy. He's that much of a player. He's just a very good football player right now on a very bad football team. But given an offense that will score some points, he is that guy that could wreck an offense.
I look at Robert Mathis's stats last year, playing at age 33. You can argue that he was getting some help because he's now suspended for the first 4 games. But be that as it may, he had 19.5 sacks to 10.5 for J.J. He had 20.5 disrupted dropbacks to 16.5 for J.J. So Robert Mathis was wreaking some havoc last year as a very pure pass-rushing defensive end. Does he tackle ball carriers quite the way that J.J.? Because J.J. can do both. He can be stout against the run, and he can disrupt the passing game, a lot of times just by getting up in the air, right?
If you have an offense, your offense is scoring points, Skip, okay? If your offense is scoring points, the other team has to score points without a doubt, which many times if you're leading, that other team, they have to throw the ball. Andrew Luck scored a lot of points, and that offense scored a lot of points, which forced the opposing offenses to have to throw, to have to pass, to have to move the ball down the field in chunks, which gave Quinn tons of opportunities because they were throwing the ball. That equals sacks.
Robert Mathis.
Robert Mathis, excuse me. Robert Mathis, that equals sacks. And so it all works together, offense and defense. The best thing J.J. Watt could have right now is an offense, and it remains to be seen if they have just that.
And I'm glad you brought up Robert Quinn. That's the other guy that when I watch him on television, I say he is virtually unblockable. Now, maybe he's been kind of a secret so far. Maybe this is the year he emerges, but they've lost their quarterback, so that could be a problem. But again, to my eye, he's at least as disruptive as J.J. Watt is. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, very disruptive.
Yeah. So is he unblockable? It's close. So right now, if you could have Robert Quinn or J.J. Watt, which way would you go?
I'm going J.J. Watt.
Just because of the intangibles?
The intangibles, the person, the player, the durability, the production, the big picture, the complete player. J.J. Watt, 25, he's got 8, 9 good years of football left in him.
Okay, last one I'm going to throw at you. This is somebody this would be a tough call. If you said you can have this guy for the next 5 years or J.J. Watt, Earl Thomas.
Okay.
And I know he's not a pass rusher, but he is the lifeblood of Seattle's defense.
Yes.
No disrespect to Richard Sherman or any of the other players, or to Cam Cameron for that matter. Cam Chancellor, well, it's Cam Cameron. But the point is, with Earl Thomas, he is everywhere with extremely high motor. He's attacking the run as well as attacking people who even think about catching a pass over the middle. And now they say he's going to return punts, which would be just a little gravy on top. But still, I would be hard-pressed. If I had a choice between Earl Thomas as my defensive leader and J.J., I would think hard about Earl Thomas.
I would think hard about Earl Thomas, too, but consider who else is around Earl Thomas.
Yeah.
He's fortunate to have a defensive line.
Yep.
Other secondary players, linebackers, again, getting back to the complete package, he benefits from the guys around him. JJ has nothing.
All right.
Or very little, I should say. Very little.
All right, so the question is he the most valuable defensive player in the league? The contract, $51.8 million, would suggest so. You heard the gentleman weigh in on J.J. Watt. We want to know what you think at home. That means you have to go to Twitter and tell us what you think. Use the hashtag WattWorth, and we will weigh in on that a little later on in the show.
As you heard all the early hype, Bridgewater, Manziel, Bortles, did you have any moments where you sat back and thought, I'm as good as those guys are? In fact, I might be better than those guys.
Those guys are awesome players, and they're going to get picked high and do great things in this league. I'm going to get picked up by somebody, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to work my tail off, and I'm going to learn how to be a professional. I'm going to learn from the veterans. I can't wait to reach out to the veterans, to those professional guys that have been there, done it, and to lean on them and learn from those guys. My mindset is wherever I'm picked, wherever I go, I'm ready to go to work. Yep. If you don't prepare for these NFL defenses and how sophisticated they are, they want to embarrass you. They want to go out and embarrass you and take away, your son's food. They don't want him to eat. And so, I make sure that I prepare the best that I can so he can have a good way.
Wow. Now look at that. So that was Derek Carr on First Take before he was drafted, speaking of Bortles and Manziel. Well, on Monday, Raiders coach Dennis Allen announced Carr would be the starter for the foreseeable future over Matt Schaub. He is the only rookie quarterback to get the start in Week 1. The Raiders open the season Sunday at the Jets. Mark Brunell still here hanging out with us. Stephen A is slowly but surely trying to join us, so hang in there. I know you want to hear from him. Stephen A, I know you hear us.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, you don't want to hear from Stephen A. Yes, you do.
You're loving this show so far.
He's actually, I can talk about me. It's all me. Yeah. No, Stephen A. Good move or bad move by the Raiders?
Good move.
It is?
Good move. Every team that's looking for a quarterback is looking for a Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was a third-round pick, a guy really kind of came out of nowhere and performed. Outplayed Matt Flynn in the preseason, got the starting nod. The rest is history. Launched him into his career. Dennis Allen believes that Derek Carr can be that guy. And he outplayed Matt Schaub in preseason by far. Matt Schaub has that elbow issue going in.
Yep.
It's more than just preseason play, Skip, I believe. Because a lot of times when you're going to put a young quarterback in there, you really want to find out, what does the team think about this young guy? Because that's very, very important. And you listen to guys, James Jones calls him Baby A-Rod, Baby Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. Wisniewski, the offensive lineman, talks about his preparation. And if you read the quotes by his teammates, they love this kid. It's a spark. They believe in him. He's a young player that can come in and really be effective. He works hard. The only concern I have, in that opener, they play the New York Jets. Rex Ryan, since 2009, is 7-3 against rookies. And it's not just that record. It's what that Jets defense can do to young quarterback.
Sure.
You know, Derek Carr clearly was excited to get the start. Rex Ryan is excited that Derek Carr gets the start. In 2011, I was with the Jets. I was on the sidelines, and Blaine Gabbert got his first action against the New York Jets. And it wasn't pretty. I mean, there was linebackers coming from everywhere, and you could tell as soon as Blaine Gabbert got in there in his rookie year, as soon as he got in there, a whole mood on the sidelines changed. They got excited. I mean, this was fresh meat, a young guy that wasn't used to recognizing defenses, wasn't used to the speed of regular season, because it's different in preseason. You're going against backups, a couple coverages, maybe a blitz or two here. You're going against Rex Ryan's Jets defense, and that could be a handful for a young quarterback. I think it's a good move. In week 2, they have the Texans. In week 3, another tough challenge. They have the Patriots. But I get the sense that this team believes in this young quarterback. Yeah. He's played well in preseason, and I think it's exactly what the Raiders need to do.
By the way, I agree in concept with your Rex theory. Strategically, I'm on board, but he doesn't have the ammo he had when you were standing on the sideline, because they're down so much in their corners that maybe the front 7 can wreak some havoc on the young man, and he's going to see people coming from different places he hasn't thought about.
This will be new for young Derek Carr.
And help us out here. Your rookie year, you did what?
I sat on the bench. and I'll tell you that my first 2 years, I was with the Packers, and I wasn't ready for prime time. And I learned a lot from Brett Favre. You know, at that time, he wasn't the legend that we know. He was a young quarterback that was struggling in recognizing defenses and playing at that level. But I was very fortunate in my first 2 years that I got to sit back and watch. I wasn't ready. Now, I was not the player, in my opinion, that Derek Carr is right now. I would say that. And so I think Derek Carr is better equipped to handle this season. But the best thing for me was sitting back and learning, because if I was thrown in there too early, Skip, you know, I don't know if I would have. I don't know if I would have lasted that long.
Could have wrecked you psychologically.
It absolutely could
for the rest of your career.
And that happens. It happens to young quarterbacks. We've seen it. You know, in recent history, with young quarterbacks get in there too early. Blaine Gabbert. And simply can't recover. So Dennis Allen must believe that this guy has enough inside of him, enough resolve and work ethic and positive attitude, the ability to bounce back from a rough week, because he'll probably have a rough week, you know, against the Jets. So it's an interesting choice, but I think it's, again, what the Raiders needed to do.
I am with you on this. We did get to sit here and look in this young man's eyes. Carrie and I and Stephen A. did, because he came through as he did his car wash here at ESPN. And he is married. He's very mature for his age. He looked like he had enough poise on camera that I figured he'd have some poise on the football field.
Sure.
And just by chance the other night, I was watching, of course, the Cleveland Browns game. Who knew that I would ever watch every snap the Cleveland Browns play? Well, guess why I'm doing that?
Wonder why.
I have no choice at this point. So I was watching the Browns game, and it was on NFL Network, and so the TV remained on as I started preparing for the show. And I kept looking up because they put the Raiders on against Seattle. Now, again, was it against Seattle? Yes, it was against the backups. Be that as it may, every time I looked up, Derek Carr was doing something else sensational.
Really?
It looked the part. Again, you have to put it in a vacuum because you have to weigh backups versus backups.
Right.
And maybe I'm overstating the case here, but he looked like he knew pretty much what he was doing against the backups. And everything looked right to me. The poise was right. The arm strength is top-notch.
Yep.
And he was throwing back shoulder fades, and it was like, wow, he looks like he can play, and he looked like he had as much command of the offense in the flashes that I saw of Matt Schaub. So I agree with you. He just outplayed Matt Schaub. Throwing to Denarius Moore, and it looked like they were starting to get a little deep connection going. That was a good thing. So they have added, the Raiders, Maurice Jones-Drew. They still have McFadden. So I'm going to assume they can run the ball a little bit.
They're going to need to.
Okay, that's fine. They added James Jones as a veteran receiver. That can't hurt. They had Rod Streeter, who I always thought was pretty good, and Denarius Moore pretty good. And on the other side of the ball, Khalil Mack, Merrill Hodge thinks he's going to be an all-timer. So will he have immediate impact? I think he will have some impact. Justin Tuck, Lamar Woodley on defense that they added. They became the NFL's oldest team with a rookie starting quarterback. Well, that's a good thing, right?
It is.
So you are surrounded by experience. Now, it might be not very good experience, but it's experience nonetheless, because this has been, most people think this is the worst team in the league. So I looked down the schedule today, and I thought, if this kid can survive the first couple, maybe the first three, because New England won't be any cakewalk either, I could look down that schedule. Even that Houston game at home, could they win that game? Sure they could. Yep. Okay, could they win 4 games this year? Yes. I think even with Derek Carr at quarterback, they could win 4 games. And if they do, he will survive his trial by rookie fire as the only rookie starting quarterback in this year's draft. And they'll be a step ahead of where they would be with Matt Schaub just trying to hang on and get them through this year, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I love the spark, and I think this kid is made of the right stuff. Obviously, we didn't talk much about his older brother.
Yeah.
There's another one who got thrown to the wolves.
Yes.
And never quite got up off the mat, right?
That's right.
Okay, so I think he learned a lot from his brother, and I think it helps that he's got the bloodlines to his big brother. It made him more capable of walking in knowing what to expect.
Yeah. He said that when he was on the show,
he did.
that his brother, a lot of people compare the two, and it allows them to work well together in terms of giving him that experience he needed. Our ESPN Power Panel has made year-end predictions in the NFL. A group of 80 writers, analysts, and insiders have consensus picks on division winners, Super Bowl champions, and individual awards. One of the picks, Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who won the Super Bowl in 2010 and the MVP award in 2011, will win the Most Valuable Player award this season. So says our Power Panel. You guys, he's back. Well, he never showed up, but he's here. Stephen A., we missed you.
Hey, it ain't my fault. I've been here since 15 minutes before the show. Talk to some other folks there so this doesn't happen again.
We will.
I'm very ticked that I had to wait to get on Skip's case for some of the asinine things he was spewing.
And that's why he did
here.
it. He actually was responsible for the technical difficulties.
I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't put it past him.
But some people out in Viewerland were suspicious as to whether you were afraid of this topic we're about to do.
Oh.
So you avoided it.
Oh.
Why would I be afraid? Do I need to wait, or can I go right in?
Go in.
I mean, what do you want?
Go in,
Let me tell you something right now. He's a bad man. And the world knows it. And that's why I can definitely see Aaron Rodgers winning league MVP honors. Let me tell you something, Skip Bayless. You didn't get something in your thick skull, okay? This is a bad boy right here. Nobody in the game can pass better. He's athletic. He can run with the football as well. And for years, Skip, you've got guys, I don't know what kind of defenses they were playing, but you know something, it wasn't working because he's Aaron Rodgers. Well, now, obviously, he missed about 6 or 7 games last year with the left collarbone injury. It was on his left shoulder, not his right shoulder. His throwing, his ability to throw the football has not been compromised. You've got Jordy Nelson. He's got his contract. He's in a good place. You got Randall Cobb, who's playing for a new contract. You got Quarles instead of Jermichael Finley. He's not the big bruising tight end that Mike McCarthy usually needs, but they'll figure that out. And keep your eyes on Eddie Lacy. Suffered a concussion in week 2. Still didn't matter. Still rushed for 1,178 yards, not to mention the fact that he with Aaron Rodgers together only played 6 games. But now you're talking about them coming into training camp, coming into the regular season, healthy, so you can't crowd the line of scrimmage because you know what? Because you want to neutralize Lacy because you got to worry about Aaron Rodgers throwing the football. And at the same time, you can't just drop back and load your coverage in your secondary worrying about Aaron Rodgers because you got to worry about Eddie Lacy. He hasn't had a running game, Skip, for most of his career in Green Bay, but he's got it now in Lacy. He's got a motivated receiver in Cobb. He's got Jordy Nelson, and he, the bad man that he is. Aaron Rodgers also is playing in what division, Skip? The NFC North. The Chicago Bears forgot how to play football on the defensive side of the ball. The Detroit Lions is just a penalty away, from messing themselves up, even though Caldwell will help them be more disciplined. And I'm not sold on Minnesota, although the only good thing I could say about Minnesota right now, outside of having Zimmer as their new coach, is that I no longer need to ponder the thought of who's going to be their quarterback, because it's clearly going to be Castle and then Bridgewater and not Christian Ponder. But in the end, it's not a enough, Skip Bayless. It's about the bad man, Aaron Rodgers, who's going to put up big numbers. He's going to do what he's going to do, and that is the reason why the Green Bay Packers have a shot at having their quarterback named the NFL MVP, because he's a bad man.
In short.
By the way, before I address your other points, my skull is thicker than yours because I have so much more hair than you have. So that's point number one.
That's true. That is true.
Point number two.
Look good,
it does look good. Point number two. Have you ever heard of this guy? He plays in, I forget, I think he's in Denver now. I lose track of him.
He's in Denver.
Yeah, this guy named Peyton Manning, who's a badder man than Aaron Rodgers ever thought about being. Have you ever heard of this guy? He's all right.
He's all right.
Okay, good. Okay, that guy that we're talking about, that Peyton guy, last year he threw 55 touchdown passes to a mere 10 interceptions. And last year he set single-season records for passing yards and touchdowns. No big deal. And his offense set single-season all-time NFL records for most points scored, most touchdowns scored, most first downs. That's all he did last year. And that Peyton guy, this preseason, didn't look like he was in midseason form. He looked to me like he was already in postseason form. And we've seen what a mission he's already on, because he got so fired up about DJ Swearinger that he ran all the way to the end zone and drew a taunting flag and fine for getting in that young man's face. That's what you're up against in Peyton Manning this year. Not to speak of, he gets Ryan Clady back, his blindside protector. His line was one of the best, if not the best last year, certainly the most experienced. Peyton Manning was sacked 18 times in 16 games. I mean, that's just ludicrous. Aaron Rodgers last year was sacked way more times than that, 21 sacks, and he only played in 9 games last year. So that's going to be a factor. And now let's get back to the Eddie Lacy factor that you wanted to focus on. Let's keep our eyes, as you just said, on Eddie Lacy. I love Eddie Lacy. I like James Starks. I like Dwyane Harris. I think they have a stable of backs, and I think you're going to see Green Bay run the ball a lot more than we're used to seeing them run the football. So all of a sudden, I think it will take some throws away from Aaron Rodgers, while Peyton, without no Sean, I'm sure Monte Ball will be okay. They're just going to throw it 60 times a game because they don't care, because you can't stop it. So you don't think that will contribute to Peyton Manning running away with his should be third straight MVP, but it will be his second straight MVP?
Why should it be the third? Yes. He was robbed.
He was robbed by Adrian Peterson 2 years ago, but that's a whole other issue.
Okay, you remember.
That's ridiculous. And
no,
you know I feel
exactly
that way.
Right, and you know it's right.
You know, I've always felt that way. But you do make that very last point that you make, Skip, absolutely correct from the perspective that if you're telling me my belief that Aaron Rodgers is going to win NFL MVP does not measure up because Green Bay's going to run the football more, I certainly believe that's plausible with Lacy, with Starks, with Harris. You're absolutely right about that. But that's the only thing that will hold Aaron Rodgers back from getting the MVP. It won't be Peyton Manning's performance, and it certainly won't be opposing defenses stopping the bad man that he is, because he's a bad brother. I'm trying to tell you right now, Aaron Rodgers is special. But the thing about it is this, Skip. Brother? Let me throw this retort your way. Let me throw this retort your way. Skip Bayless?
Yes, go ahead.
How about this? Just like I'm willing to concede that you have a point about how they may run the football more, are you willing to concede, although everyone is in Seattle, that Seattle may have provided the recipe to sort of rattle that passing game of the Denver Broncos from the perspective of getting in dudes' faces, being a bit physical, all right, and compromising what Denver's trying to do that way. Wes Welker is just a knock upside his head from being gone for the season, if not his career. I'm not sure about Julius Thomas and Demaryius Thomas after what I saw in the Super Bowl. We still got an APB out for Eric Decker. I hear he's been spotted at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey with the Jets. But we don't know yet because we still looking for him from the Super Bowl. So for me, it's just a thought, Skip Bayless, that although Peyton is big time, you can't poo-poo 55 touchdowns, just 10 interceptions. All right? In the end, do you really expect that to happen again after the recipe has been provided via the beatdown we witnessed in that 43-8 drubbing we witnessed in the Super Bowl?
Okay, back to your Seattle point. I agree with you. They provided the blueprint. But I don't see anybody else out there who has the ammo to back up the blueprint. How many Seattle Seahawks secondaries are there on Peyton's schedule except for Seattle's? I don't see any. I'm sorry.
I don't disagree in terms of the secondary. That's not what I'm implying, because you're right about that. And I acknowledged that before I made my point. I understand everybody's not Seattle. What I'm saying to you is that if you've got a hit man on the squad, to me it wasn't just Seattle's personnel. It was the fact that Cam Chancellor's early hit in the Super Bowl set the tone by intimidating Denver receivers. I think Peyton Manning running down to the end zone and getting Swearingen's face after the hit on Welkin, all of this stuff is indicative of a quarterback that doesn't want to see his players rattled. Because Denver has shown they can be rattled. I know how talented they are. I know how big time they are. But what people need to understand is that when I question their heart, I'm not saying they can't play. I'm saying the exact opposite. You are elite performers. There is no excuse to get stomped in a Super Bowl the way that you got stomped with that talent unless one thing occurred. Your heart got snatched out your chest. That is what happened to the Denver Broncos. And when you show that that can happen to you, Skip, I'm sorry. I don't know how you get around that. I really don't.
I think that will have nothing to do with this year's regular season, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
And my closing point to you is, yes, Eric Decker is APB in MetLife, as you just said, but there's this guy, Emmanuel Sanders, we've had on the show.
He was with the Steelers. He's now with the Broncos.
You can't give me that he's not an upgrade over Eric Decker.
He is an upgrade.
Okay,
he is an upgrade. So I give you that.
My point is, again, will Wes Welker make it through the season? I have no idea. If he doesn't, point taken for you. But Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a more explosive player for Peyton than Eric Decker was.
Now, Stephen A., you just said the Broncos had their heart snatched from their chest. Was that the quote?
In the Super Bowl. Oh, okay. That is correct.
So, well, I don't know. I guess the experts didn't hear about that because they still have them as the favorites to win the Super Bowl this coming season.
Some of those same experts had the Broncos winning the Super Bowl against Seattle. Where were they? We couldn't find them until they just made this election.
All right, well.
Skip and I have been here.
Listen.
Skip and I have been here, Kerry, along with yourself.
Yes.
Where have those experts been since the Super Bowl?
We've been here.
Is the APB out for them, too?
Where are they?
At?
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The new college football playoff.
The Seminoles have completed the perfect season.
Your home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
Football outsiders and numberfire.com say the Denver Broncos have a 17% chance of winning the Super Bowl. Now the ESPN Power Panel also making its prediction for who will win said Super Bowl this season. They agree. Denver Broncos will win the championship. Does Stephen A. Smith agree? We addressed it at the top of the show. We want you to weigh in, kind sir.
Well, I don't agree with it. And I know that I'm sitting here and, I picked Aaron Rodgers, as a probable pick for the NFL MVP. And, somebody like Skip, the duplicitous Skip Bayless with his slick self, will sit there and take it as if I'm knocking one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history in Peyton Manning, which I am not doing. But when we talk about the Broncos being the pick to win the Super Bowl, I'm sorry. I don't see them being better than the New England Patriots. I really, really don't. Despite the plethora of injuries to Gronkowski, to Danny Amendola, Wes Welker departing so Amendola could ultimately come on board, figuring things out at receiver with Kimbrell Tompkins and all of these guys. I'm just looking at the New England Patriots, and they still finished as the third highest scoring team in the NFL last year, averaging more than 27 points per game. Well, who do they have coming back here? They're loaded at the receiver spot with these boys. You've got Ridley and Vereen at your running back spot, and hopefully Ridley's he won't have fumbleitis this time around. You still have one of the great quarterbacks in the game in Tom Brady. You still have what the polls say is the best coach in the game in Bill Belichick. You got Vince Wilfork coming back on defense, along with Jared Mayo, along with adding Darrelle Revis to the secondary to replace Aqib Talib, which a lot of people would perceive as being an upgrade. I just look at the New England Patriots, who were in the AFC Championship game last year against Denver, and I say this same franchise that's been devoid of a Super Bowl championship since 2004, which is now 10 years, I think they'll probably do. And I think I could see the New England Patriots coming out of the AFC. I certainly don't view Denver as the team to knock them off. Regardless of Peyton Manning and his greatness, the acquisition of Emmanuel Sanders, still having the Thomases in tow, Monte Ball, in some people's eyes anyway, will be perceived as an upgrade from Noshan Moreno. I just see the New England Patriots being better because I think they're better coached. And dare I say right now, I just believe they have more heart. And I believe that I think if the pieces are in place and they're healthy, they're the pick out of the AFC and not Denver.
And obviously we know that the best overall quarterback in all of pro football resides in Foxborough, that he's a Patriot. Yes, we do.
No, but he is the best dressed. He is the best dressed. Yeah, he has this blazer stuff.
Okay, I got it.
He has. Okay. No, I don't wear. It's not his stuff. It's not his.
I completely concur that you've finally seen the light, and I agree with every point that you just made about the New England Patriots. Now, what about those guys up in Seattle? Shouldn't they be a little offended that the team what are all your words that you used for that game? They got punked, bum rushed, ramrodded. You know, Seattle did that to the Denver Broncos, and now we have two respected simulations, and we have a consensus of 80 ESPN expert picks saying that Denver is going to do something that hasn't been done in 40 years. Think about this. And as I said at the top of the show, I'm not big on historical stats, but this one I'm taking to my bank, Mr. Smith. It's been 40 years since the Miami Dolphins lost to my Dallas Cowboys in 1971 in the Super Bowl and came back after the 72 season and beat the Washington Redskins in the Super Bowl. Hasn't happened again. We just saw it happen in the NBA, but that's a special team. That's the Spurs. But in the NFL, 40 years. So now we're saying that everybody is picking Denver to break a 40-year drought. And to get back because of what? I need somebody to explain the what to me here because I can't see the what. That defense last year in Denver ranked 22nd in points allowed. So you lost a lot of what I thought were pretty valuable cogs off that defense in DRC, Wesley Woodyard, Sean Phillips, Robert Ayers, Mike Adams, Paris Lennon. These are all decent football players. They're all gone. And you added a guy, again, DeMarcus Ware. I love him off the field. He just doesn't make enough plays. Is he going to change the face of that defense and suddenly make it an elite defense? I don't see it. You know my feelings on Aqib Talib. He's never there when you really, really need him. And at the back end, okay, I'll give you T.J. Ward. I think he's a really good football player, and that's a big upgrade at their safety spot.
At the safety spot, yes.
Fine. Okay, all well and good. But then I think it boils down to schedule or lack thereof schedule. And you're telling me that Denver's schedule is a cakewalk when they have to go to Seattle, they have to go back to New England as they did last year.
They opened the season against Luck.
Okay, you got it. Well, that's true. They get that game's in. I think it's in Denver, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is. It's in Denver. Then they have to go to Cincinnati. They obviously have to go to San Diego, and they have to go to Kansas City. And remember, San Diego is coming. San Diego played 3 close games against Denver last year and beat them in Week 15 in Denver. So you don't think that they can play Denver close games and maybe beat them a couple of times this year? I think they do. So could Denver lose 5 of those games at home? They got San Francisco and Arizona. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm seeing a 13-3 that would give them home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And I think that's what the experts are saying, that, they're just going to have a cakewalk through the playoffs in the Mile High atmosphere. I'm not seeing that. So I don't get how can you say they're better than Seattle? Seattle looks even better than it looked at this point last year.
Well, don't say you. Talk to those experts that that picked them. I'm not saying any of these teams are better than Seattle. I'm not saying Denver or New England would beat Seattle. I'm just saying that before we talk about the Broncos going back to the Super Bowl and winning, don't we need to talk about them getting out of the AFC? And when it comes to them getting out of the AFC, I'm looking at New England instead of Denver. But I obviously give Seattle an edge. And here's the biggest reason why I give Seattle the edge, Skip. It's not just because their defense, but it's a point that I think you and others made a little over a week ago when you talked about them being in the Pacific Northwest, not getting the pub, the acclaim, and everything else that comes along with capturing a championship and, the Legion of Boom and all of that stuff. And so there's something about them that, they carry the figurative, chip on their shoulder. And they carry it with them all the time. And I look at them and I say, hey, I love that about them because I think that's what a champion's got to have. And I think they have it. I really do.
I agree.
You do?
Yes, I do.
He's a wise man.
Agreed,
finally.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, wise
He's
one,
learning.
Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, wise one, Stephen A.
He
Smith.
sees all about the National Football League.
Well, the
hey,
show's
that's
so
why they
much
call
better.
me. Hey,
What'd
my
they call
nickname
you?
in college was Saul. That's what they called me, the wise man.
That's true.
There you have it, folks. Saul has spoken. Well, after being released by the Rams this weekend, Michael Sam remains out of work. But Lions head coach Jim Caldwell said he doesn't think Michael Sam's sexual orientation has anything to do with the fact that he has not landed a job in the league. Let's listen.
He wasn't here on our squad. We didn't play against them. Case is the fact that, he doesn't fit in, with whomever's system or anybody's system right now in terms of being able to come in and play for them at this point in time. If he could benefit someone, and he still may. A lot of things happen here in the next 3 or 4 days anyway, but he still may, and he may still get that opportunity.
Do you think it has anything to do with his homosexuality?
I doubt that seriously.
Okay, I don't know what that was, but how about this? In short, he said he doesn't think it's his skill set. Stephen A., do you agree?
No, I do not agree, respectfully. I'm not accusing Jim Caldwell of lying in any way. He's a football man. He's a God-fearing individual. He's one of the most fair-minded individuals that I've ever met associated with the NFL. He's a good man, and I'm quite sure as it pertains to him, Michael Sam's sexual orientation had absolutely nothing to do with it. But he did use words like, I would assume, I think. He doesn't know. And he can't say concretely and definitively that that had nothing to do with it any more than the rest of us can say it did have something to do with it. So we all understand that none of us know for sure what's in the minds and hearts and conscience of NFL coaches and executives throughout this league. But here's what we have to pay attention to. Even though since 1994, only 46.8% of seventh-round picks have made a roster. And over the last 4 years, that number jumped up to 52.8%. Essentially, Michael Sam making the team as on that 53-man roster was a 50-50 proposition, Skip. So we understand that. That's a 50-50 proposition. But then we have to take this reality into consideration. He's the co-defensive player of the year in the #1 football conference in America, by and large, to everybody before Alabama lost in the Iron Bowl to Auburn and ultimately lost to Oklahoma in a bowl game. Before that, the SEC were reigning 7-time national champions. They ran the show in college football. This dude was the co-defensive player of the year in that conference. He comes to St. Louis because he never should have dropped to the 7th round. Let's call it what it is. So when he got to the 7th round and he was the 249th overall pick, that in itself appeared egregious. Then he goes on a team that's considered one of the elite, if not the most elite team in the game in terms of bodies on a defensive line. And this guy in preseason, albeit against backups, had about 3 sacks, 11 tackles, 6 sacks in one game, and everybody acknowledged that he could play the game of football. So if you can't make that squad, but you make it down to that Saturday where the roster has to be cut to 53, there's no shame in that game because we understand why, considering how deep St. Louis is. But everybody else ain't that deep. And you got to believe, even though they call him a tweener, too slow in a 3-4 to play the linebacker spot and drop back into coverage, too small to rush the passer against first-tier starting offensive line players in the NFL, there is no doubt that this guy deserves an opportunity to play for another team and really showcase his skills. The fact that he didn't even receive, that he cleared waivers and nobody picked him up, not even for the practice squad, I'm sorry. It's just my personal opinion and my belief. But damn it, I'm not that stupid. You can't convince me that this was entirely about football. This was about more than football, and we all know what we're talking about here.
Okay, before I respond to what you just said, I want to be clear once again. I would have taken Michael Sam in the 3rd round. I would want him on my football team because I love productive SEC football players, and he was one. Now, back to your point, I can't disagree with your conclusion because I don't know. Let's be candid here. Are there still players and coaches around this league on other teams other than the Rams who don't believe in Michael Sam's sexual orientation? Sure, they're out there. But was that the factor as to why Michael Sam didn't make any roster, including the 10-man practice squad in St. Louis? I just have a hard time believing that, Stephen A. I'm stuck on the point that I made 2 days ago. You know how these teams want to pull together with no distractions as they approach game 1 of the regular season. And Michael Sam is a big story. And he should be a big story, but again, it's almost like the Tim Tebow syndrome that he becomes more trouble than he's worth because they didn't want the Tebow circus to be brought to town with Tim Tebow. So in this case, it's a double-edged sword because while Michael Sam should be a big story, because the gay community would want him to be a big story, sure, then the fact that he is a big story, but he's not a great football player, he's a borderline because he's a tweener, he's not that big, not that fast. Again, I want him on my team, but some teams are saying, well, is it more trouble than he's worth because the media will descend on our locker room? Not in a bad way, in a good way for Michael Sam, but it's just a way. It's just a big, huge, and I don't like the word distraction because it has negative connotation. It's just commotion before your first regular season game. It's game 1, and you don't want the media asking everyone about a player who will basically be irrelevant to your chances of winning and losing this year, Michael Sam. So why would anybody want that? I'm not surprised at all that the rest of the league would say, no, we're not interested. Might they be interested week 3, week 4 as injuries occur, bye weeks occur? Sure, I think they would. I could be wrong, but I think they will be.
Well, I don't disagree with that, and in no way was I were my comments directed at the St. Louis Rams. They drafted him. Yep. I think Jeff Fisher, in the worst way, wanted Michael Sam to make the team. I think that he didn't make the team because Jeff Fisher had better options as it pertained to football players.
Yep.
I think Ethan Westbrooks outplayed Michael Sam. He did. I think the other guys, you got 5 first-round picks on that defensive line on your roster. I don't think there's any question that as it pertains to the St. Louis Rams, it was all about football.
Yep.
The problem is those other teams, it very well could be what you said, Skip. But considering the fact that this dude has that level of promise in terms of what we saw from him in the preseason, combined with the fact that other teams are not the St. Louis Rams, They're not as gifted at that position.
Yep.
For him not to even make the practice squad, to be picked up to make the practice squad. And by the way, it's still Tuesday, so I surmise it's still a possibility that he could be picked up. So all of that would be null and void if he's picked up today. But if he's not picked up by anybody, not even to make a practice squad, that speaks about more than football. And again, I'm going to say something that I said before, and people need to get a hold of this. Some folks are slow on the uptake. Nobody is debating that Michael Sam deserved the opportunity. Nobody is debating the fact that we live in a very tolerant society. We have graduated from where we once were on a multitude of levels, okay? But there is still always progress to be made, as even the gay community would acknowledge. And this has something to do with that. You do wrong, no matter how wrong it is. There are some people, man, that are uncomfortable in the locker room with that kind of presence. And no matter how egregious we might find that, it's a reality that an executive has to take into consideration when he thinks about who he's adding to his team. We can lament it all day long. It's reality.
By the numbers of the 41 picks made in this year's 7th round, Michael Sam's round, only 22 made the initial 53-man roster, and only 4 of those made it onto the practice squad. On balance here, gentlemen. Huge news today, guys. Big, huge, gigantic news, Skip Bayless.
What?
It's the debut of the Stephen A. Smith Show.
It's finally here?
Finally here on Mad Dog Radio on Sirius from 1 to 3. Just 2 hours. They only gave you 2 hours, Stephen A. That's not enough time. That's all
I need.
Okay.
That's all I need, Kerry. I mean, it's me by myself. Unfiltered. Buckle up, brace yourselves. You know, I just wanna warn. Listen, the show is an ESPN production. I get all of that. You understand the support that I've gotten from the worldwide leader. I can't thank them enough. But I wanna let the people know that the words expressed ESPN is not responsible for. Brace yourself. I'm coming, Skip. You know me. It is what it is. It's not Skip's fault what I'm going to say. It's not Kerry Champion's fault what I'm going to say. It's not the bosses at ESPN's fault what I'm going to say. I'm just letting everybody know ahead of time. I apologize ahead of time, okay?
He's already
just brace yourself.
Already?
I'm
Essentially,
sorry.
you're saying tune in. Let me tell you something. I'm coming in. Right there.
It's about that time.
We'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern.
It's about
ESPN
that time.
2. His show, 1 to 3. Mad Dog Radio on Sirius.
Yes, sir.